touch on a town we told you about before, but there's more to this country than just Fairview.
Yeah, sure there is, Mike. We're talking about what I like to refer to as the South Okanagan Highlands. And we have the Okanagan Valley on one side, that's just to the east. Then we have the Highlands, Mount Cobo, Mount Orofino, all that Highlands area in there. Very dry country.
The Richter Pass cuts right through there.
Richter Pass cuts through there. And then on the other side, you have the Similkameen Valley. So we're talking about that high country between the South Similkameen Valley and the South Okanagan. And, you know, when people think of that country, what do they think of? Well, usually they think of ranching, they think of orchards, they think of vineyards, they think of desert country, but there is another dimension. And the other dimension is there is a gold and silver belt in that country, which is really quite fascinating when you look at it very, very closely and when you do the research on it.
You know, it's fascinating how the minerals seem to well up out of the ground there. This is Spotted Lake, and it has a reputation.
Yeah, the reputation of Spotted Lake, I think about 15 years ago, National Geographic did an article on Spotted Lake, and they called it the richest mineralized deposit of water in the world.
Now, this was very important to the Indian people of that community. They considered it sacred, spirited area?
Sure, it has all sorts of salts in it. It has silver, it has magnesium, it has all sorts of different sort of qualities in that lake, and they considered it sacred. That's true. But this is the type of country the prospectors are going through. They didn't give Spotted Lake a second glance.
I guess not. They were looking for something that glinted in the ground a little bit more.
Sure they were.
Okay, going to take a break here. Be back in a second to take a look at what we call the South Okanagan Highlands right after these words. Mike Roberts and Bill Barley talking about the South Okanagan Highlands, a region which you say has got silver and gold stringers through it.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Some copper in the area as well, but mostly silver and gold. And it was discovered essentially by Sheenan and Gwatkins, two prospectors who were wandering through that dry, arid country in the 1880s, 1890s. And by the early or mid-1890s, a number of mines were coming into production. And this was free milling quartz. In other words, when you examine the reports of the time, the Minister of Mines reports, 1897, said this is the biggest quartz showing in the province of British Columbia. That's quite a statement, Mike.
And this is what you're talking about. This is a piece of quartz conceivably could have been broken off the quartz stringers in the area, and this right in here is gold that would have been freed up by the crushing process.
That's right.
This is kind of a neat sample anyway, because the gold is right here, and right there is iron pyrite.
That's right.
Now, so that's fool's gold, some people would call it, and they're both evident in the same sample and attracted my attention.
That's got quartz all shot through it, and that's what they're looking for. And what they did, of course, these early miners recognized this. They liked free gold. They would use an arrastra. And here's a picture of the rattler.
This is the smuggler, and that is a horse-drawn grinder. Crusher.
It's a crusher, actually. So this is the smuggler mine, and here's the guy, and the horse goes round and round and round, and there's quartz, and you can see the free quartz all the way around in this picture, and he's grinding that down. He will take his gold out of that and move it very, very easily.
And this is called free milling, as opposed to a more elaborate process that needs chemicals to extract the gold.
Yeah, cyanide and so on. No, you don't. They wouldn't use that and didn't use that at that particular time. And the next mine is the Strathire, and here again you can see this white quartz on the outside. Some of that's good quartz, some of it's been discarded. The best goes through the mill.
So I mean, if you were to walk through that country today, you may come upon a pile of quartz rock, and you say, "What this?" And it very probably could be the slag heap from that area.
But watch when you reach down in some of those areas, because there are rattlers all through this country.
Very good point. Okay. So the Strathire, the smuggler?
The smuggler, and of course the major mine in that area was really the Morning Star. So the Morning Star, here's an example of the Morning Star. You still see the quartz here. And it was operated in the 1890s and again in the 30s and 40s, which is interesting. But there were a whole bunch of mines in there. There was the Tin Horn and the Joe Dandy and the Black Bear and the Bank of Fairview and a whole bunch of other mines scattered all through that in that particular area.
One of the mines was called the Rattler. So good point. I mean, they called it that because they were filled in that area.
And what happens when you think the mines are going to last forever? A town is built.
Sure.
And the first town is not very good. It's up the Gulch, the first settlement up there, and this is the Fairview Hotel. Still, this building is still standing, Mike, which is interesting, and it's on the old Hess property. I knew it well years ago. Some things, I found an old gun close by it some years ago, and then they went down to the flats. So at the mouth of Reed Creek Gulch, they laid out another town, and this was Fairview. And here you have a picture of Fairview as it looks, and one of the early hotels, and the biggest hotel at that time was the Golden Gate. And here's
It's a log structure,
Sure
very
it is.
substantial.
Yeah.
This is going to last forever.
But it wasn't good enough for Fairview.
No?
No, no. The Hotel Fairview, which we call the Big Teepee,
Yeah.
was then put in there, and it burned down in 1902, and we recovered some nice items from and we showed some of these, I think, 10 years ago or something.
Yeah. Louis, American silver dollars.
Yeah.
A beautiful gold piece.
Yeah.
A wedding band.
Yeah.
A sterling silver chain, and spoon. And this item right here, which just fascinates me, that has to be one of the prettiest, most beautiful diamond rings I've ever seen.
Yeah, Cyril Murray and I found that when we were young teachers. Used to go down there in the morning and screen that ground, and did very well. We only got about $15,000 worth of stuff out of it, but there's some very nice items.
Fairview was a substantial town. It was
sure.
the substantial town, and the Big Teepee was the best hotel of the bunch.
Yeah, sure it was. Once the Big Teepee burned down, it started to decline. There's no doubt about it. But that wasn't the only activity in that gold and silver.
We're talking
and copper
about
belt.
that's the Okanagan side
That's
of
right.
the Highlands.
Sure. Now
Okay.
you can go over to that Similkameen side, and you can start around Olalla. And Olalla was really kind of a copper gold belt, and some of the mines there, on actual assays that were not phony assays, yielded up to 40 ounces of gold per ton. And again, the grassroots veins were spectacular. You had the Dolphin, and you had the Searchlight, and you had the Bullion, and you had the Copper King, and you had all sorts of mines up there, gold and copper. And of course, this resulted in a new town coming into being. This was Olalla.
Yeah.
And here's Olalla. Here's one of the freighting teams coming through Olalla and on the way to the mines.
Now,
And
the Green Mountain Road was put in here. That was the road which was connecting Penticton
Sure.
to the Similkameen country.
Stagecoaches and freight wagons came over that road in the 1890s, Mike, no doubt about it. And some of the prospectors, of course, they take off from Olalla. And here's some of the prospectors ready to go into the hills to look for another prospect.
They look kind of like citified prospectors to me, you know? I mean, they don't look rugged as the ones I imagine out of the Barkerville country.
That's probably about 1907, 1908, so they're still pretty rugged. And they had a hotel, a pretty substantial hotel in Olalla. This is the Hotel Olalla.
This is a mining certificate from that area.
Very rare.
Now, again, these mining certificates were probably more valuable for as a collector's item than they ever were at the time.
Oh, yeah. This is 1890s. They didn't get this off the ground. They called it the Silver Bow Quartz Mining Company. And that silver bow comes from the United States, by the way. That name is quite common down there, not very common in British Columbia. But they never got it off the ground because nobody's taken this up. We got it, I purchased it years and years ago in Oliver.
Again, it is the printer's art that is commemorated there, and the optimism of speculators.
Sure.
That's probably all they ever mined was quartz. They never probably even mined that.
Well, no, they weren't interested. They were mining the public. There's no doubt about that. So we have Olalla, but there are other towns spring up at the same time. There's Upper Cara Mia, which is the first Cara Mia, which we mentioned in another program years ago as well. But we didn't have this picture of this particular hotel. And this is the Cara Mia Hotel with a bunch of people out in front at Upper Cara Mia.
A handsome establishment.
But it wasn't close enough to water. So they shifted it down about 3/4 of a mile, and they came to Cara Mia Center. And Cara Mia Center, Mike, here's the Central Hotel in Cara Mia Center. Beautiful hotel. Beautiful hotel. Harry Tweddle's old hotel. And then there's the livery stable, which was still standing when I was younger.
This is the Palace Livery and Foods. Feeds, sorry.
Yeah, and there you see a stagecoach and freighting teams coming through. It is booming. The area is booming because everyone thinks it's going to be another nickel plate, right?
Yeah, because it's just down the road. It's in Headley, and it's got gold in riches.
Yeah, so they're prospecting around Olalla, and then they start shifting down the valley, and then the railroad comes in from the Great Northern. And then Cara Mia proper, which we know as Cara Mia today, comes into being. And Cara Mia proper is quite interesting. Here is the Cara Mia Hotel, which was still standing, Mike, when I was about like this in the early 1950s.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember going in there once, and I'm sitting down to have breakfast, and an old-timer comes down the stairs. He was staying in the hotel. He looks at me and says, "Are you Bill Barley?" And I said, "Yeah." "You're interested in mining?" I said, "Yeah. Yeah, I was brought up in a mining town, brought up in mining country." "Well," he says, "I got a pretty good prospect down in the South Valley." I said, "Oh, have you?" "Yeah," it's called Horn Silver. And I said, "Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think I know where it is. Yeah, up in the side hill there." I said, "He's really good silver." And he wasn't lying. It was great silver. And I said, well, but I asked a question I should have asked. I
Smart.
said, how's the access to it? Well, he says, just about perpendicular, he says. I said, I think I'll pass on that 10 cents a share, which I did. But that later became the Utica, and the Utica produced millions of ounces of silver.
And that, has it got Danco mine sign on it right now?
Yes, now
The
Danco. So it was Horn Silver, and then
And all the
Utica,
other.
and then Danco.
Now, this is silver ore. Now, how does it reach this stage?
That would go through a ball mill. Yeah.
Now, it
Actual
looks
crushing.
sort of leaden here.
Yeah, it
I mean,
does.
it does, but what's the big determiner? I mean, if this was lead,
It
what
would bend.
do?
It would bend very easily, but silver tends to fracture, so it's
This-
more fragile than lead.
This is not bending, and this
and it
is
isn't.
almost pure silver in here.
Yeah, that's 96% pure, which is surprising. That
Yeah.
came out of a ball mill.
Now, silver, it's kind of like gold. This is a
Yeah.
big slug of natural silver ore.
And it feels heavy, but it isn't. It's only about half the weight of gold.
But, I mean, that looks interesting, too,
Yeah,
doesn't it? You
sure.
know they had the same birth, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Very interesting stuff. Is there a story behind how you managed to get this big handful of stuff here?
I got about 1,000 ounces of that. We mentioned it in a program some years ago, Mike, which I won't go over, and it didn't come from Similkameen, it came from the Grand Forks.
All right, but that's what that's what this
Sure.
old timer was hauling out of
Oh,
the
yeah.
Utica.
Oh, no doubt about it. His ore was absolutely spectacular. And that silver belt down in the Utica goes right across the line. Just across the border, there's a mine called the Ruby Mine.
I've heard of that in Washington State, so
Here's a picture of the ruby, still standing there today, as it looks like, I think, today. I haven't been down there for a couple of years, but I took this shot about 4 years ago or 5 years ago. It's great shape. And there's also a little bit of a patch of that vein up there, somewhere on the Indian Reserve, on the Chopaka Reserve. And it's
just on the western side of
that's
the
right.
Similkameen.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting stuff. So you managed to dodge that bullet. Do you regret dodging the bullet of investing at 10 cents a share in the Utica? That could have been a valuable little property there.
Yeah, it was a valuable little property, but...
You ever shake your head and say, how am I ever rejected that?
Yeah, but I mean, you hit and miss in mining. I mean, that's the way mining goes. So Cara Mia, you see, but Cara Mia's prospered because of it. So we had that picture of the Hotel Cara Mia's,
Yeah.
and now you have kind of an interesting shot, which I like, and this is a butcher shop in Cara Mia's. And on one side on the left-hand side is George Costin, and the other side is Sam McCurdy. And the McCurdys are still in that area, and the Costins are still in that area.
Well,
which
as
is
they named the
interesting.
community after
Sure.
them down there,
Sure.
at the Flash and Amber Light.
Yeah, and this is turn of the century stuff.
Yeah.
And then we have a little later photograph, probably around 1912, and this shows the stagecoach coming in from Penticton, and behind it is a Cadillac car. And there's Harry Tweddle standing there, too, looking. He's the overlord of everything he sees. And indeed he is. Very interesting guy, Harry Tweddle.
So that's an important photograph for all sorts of reasons.
Sure.
It's a transition. Culture is changing, but still the masters of the community are there.
But what happened, Mike, between the 1890s and about 1905, almost all of those mines, except for the Utica, faded. They didn't go to depth. That's the old Okanagan problem. So you had Olalla really declined dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
Upper Cara Mia disappeared. Cara Mia Center almost disappeared. Cara Mia itself stayed there because of the crossroads, because of the railroad. Fairview was virtually gone by 1910. And so you had that area of nothing happening in the mineral deposits in that area, and no one really interested. Gold was $20 an ounce. But what happens next, Mike, is gold jumps in 1932 to $35 an ounce, almost double. And that means there's a new interest in mining all across British Columbia, and the Okanagan Highlands is no exception.
All right, we're going to come back to that very point. When gold goes up to 35 bucks an ounce, this place is interesting again. We'll return when Gold Trails and Ghost Towns come back in 2 minutes. Mike Roberts and Bill Barley, and as we said, when the price of gold nearly doubles, things that weren't economical to mine before suddenly become maybe very valuable.
Of course. Yeah, they looked right from the border north, and almost on the border is Kruger Mountain, and they had two very good mines there, the Lakeview and the Dividend, and both of those produced gold over an ounce a ton, and that's considered extremely good.
That's right on the outskirts of Osoyoos,
Oh,
right,
sure
well,
it is.
almost in the city limits.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, very definitely. Then we went back into Fairview, and they reopened some of the properties there, mostly the Morning Star. And then we went north of that on the flanks of Orofino Mountain. And Orofino Mountain had a number of small quartz veins carrying free gold in there. They now became profitable to mine. So they established a number of claims in there and two mines. One was the Twin Lakes mine. owned, one of the major shareholders was old Hugh Lear, whom I knew quite well.
Now, this is a photograph, and a Stocks photograph, a very important photographer in the Okanagan.
Oh, yeah, Lum Stocks is very interesting. Beautiful photographer.
Now, this guy is very proud of what he's holding right there.
Yeah, that's old Hugh Lear, and he was a fascinating guy, and he's holding bar number 3, and that is almost pure gold. It's 337 ounces, which is about $170,000 today.
Open up on this shot. Who's the guy holding the pipe right behind
Well,
him there?
that's Warwick Woodward. He's a lawyer in town. He was one of the shareholders as well.
The other two guys are not identified.
Yes, Carson McLeod, the other one standing, is.
And the guy sitting, the young guy, looks pretty eager.
Yeah, he's the mine manager. He isn't identified. I will find his name eventually, but I haven't found it yet. So this is one of the mines that gets off the ground. But there was probably a better mine than the Twin Lakes, and this was the Grand Oro. And the Grand Oro was an interesting mine indeed. And here's an example of the Grand Oro. This is the mill in the Grand Oro. Remember, there were a lot of miners there, Mike. And this is another McLeod from Penticton, Jack McLeod. He's the mine manager holding a bar, probably only 250 ounces.
But not bad to have.
Not bad
And did they pump many of these out? I mean, were there like 4 of these a year, 5, 6?
But again, it did not go to depth. But I'll tell you who did profit. Some of the miners profited because they were high graders. In other words, they helped themselves to some of the best of the ore. And there's a very, very fascinating story. Some of the details were provided by Dr. John Gibson of Penticton. And there were 2 tins, 2 tobacco tins hidden in that area. And the 2 tobacco tins were Ogden's tobacco. They would hold about 15 pounds of gold if it was well crushed, and it was probably well crushed, so they wouldn't have much quartz in there. They'd have mostly gold. So there's about 30 pounds of gold up there. And what happened is these two were heading for Penticton to trade this off to somebody in Penticton who was buying high-grade gold, and high-graded gold as well. And they were interrupted on the way. They took to the bush, and it was at twilight, and they buried it under a lone pine tree. They left the car down on the old road, the old winding road to Penticton, and buried it under a lone pine. And it was dark at night, so they knew then they went down to Penticton because they could not return. They thought somebody might be watching them. Came back the next day, could not find where they had buried it. The twilight had confused them. And they knew it was 2 Ogden tins. People came back looking for that for about 3 decades. There's still the odd person going in there with a watchful eye in that particular area, Mike, looking for 2 old, pretty well battered Ogden tobacco tins.
Under a much bigger lone pine. What year are we talking about here?
Now remember, that's been all burned over now.
Oh, well, that's all right.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still willing to give it a try.
We're talking 1935.
And they're coming up the road from Cara Mia to Penticton.
They're coming up from the Orofino mountain area into Penticton.
Okay.
And they hear somebody coming along, and they see the lights, so they say, hold on, we better get rid of this, could be the police. So they duck this, they go up the hill. It's twilight. They scoop out a little hole about maybe 8-10 inches deep, is what they told some of their close friends, and they deposit these 2 tins in there, cover the hole up, and away they go back to the car, and they go on to Penticton. Nobody stops them, okay? But they're still not sure, so they come back the next day, ready to pick up their high-graded gold, and they say, one guy says, gee, I think we were here, and the other guy said, no, we were at this bend. Well, I'm not sure, and they weren't sure. And as far as we know, and a number of people have looked for it, I think that those tins are still there. I think there's probably around 25 to 30 pounds of pure gold in there, which is not spectacular, but it's quite attractive.
Well, at $385 an ounce, I would say so.
That's $385 U.S. It's over 500 Canadian. So when each pound's worth.
So what's my
ounces.
best technique here? Do I take a dog who sniffs out gold? Do I take a metal detector? Do I just find that road from Orofino Mountain to Penticton?
The old road. Yeah,
they're coming up a hill.
Yeah.
They ride up the uphill side of this place.
Well, you could use a metal detector, but to cover 1 acre with a metal detector takes days to do.
Yeah.
Maybe a good week. To cover 10 acres takes a number of weeks. You can try dowsing. You can try another number of methods.
Listen, but you got to have luck in that game, so I'm going to trust it entirely to luck. You know, I mean, just head straight in there. If you were doing it, would you lay down a grid work and say, this is the section I'm going to do first, and this is the section I'm going to do next?
If I were prepared to expend 3 or 4 years on it, yeah, but I don't think it's worth 3 or 4 years.
I don't know how you can say that. That sounds like a spectacular amount of gold. 2 Ogden tobacco tins filled with not pure gold, but the leavings after the crush.
Yeah.
Is this going to happen again? Because, of course, there was speculation about, well, there was a mine, a gold, at 1,600 feet down.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that's going to be very expensive to get at and may not be ever accessible.
Well, you know, it has to be very high-grade ore if you're going to go down that far, unless you have an open pit. And but the Okanagan, the general truism in the Okanagan doesn't go to depth, Mike. Lots of good stuff in surface. In fact, 82% of that area, if you look at a map of the area and go over the area, 82% of it is covered by overburden, and only about 18% you can actually see the rock structure where you can see the veins coming through.
Now, in some of those photos we showed today, it shows the rolling hillsides of the Okanagan. Yeah. That is glacial till. That is gravels and sands. Sure. That is the overburden that's covering up the bedrock.
Of course it is.
And it's in the bedrock where you're going to find this gold.
Yep, definitely.
So open pit mines everywhere in the Okanagan, that's got to be an environmentally sensitive issue.
Difficult to handle now.
That's why so much of the gold history of this area is history. It happened before all of this observation. Got a couple of artifacts for you to take a look at here. What's so special about W.B. Riley, Loomis, Washington?
Well, there's a Fairview mark on it, so that was sent around the turn of the century. So there's a cancellation of Fairview. And the other one, there's another one there as well. It goes to Camp McKinney via Fairview. So that goes on the old stagecoach road, which went from Fairview to Camp McKinney. And there were still people prowling around Camp McKinney at the time. And one of those dates was 1898, and the other one just about the same time.
And do you happen to know W.B. Riley? I mean,
no,
is there any kind of character there? Is somebody you might want to know?
I could look in the Minister of Mines reports, the index 1874-1936. I might find his name.
W.B. Riley. Okay. Fascinating stuff. Would it be a tobacco tin that would be maybe about this size?
A little bit bigger.
A little bit bigger than this size here. Okay, and filled with gold and little quartz,
a little bit of quartz
crushed together there.
Yeah.
1936. Road from the Orofino Mountain.
That's right.
Do you have 2 or 3 years? Anyway, thank you very much. The South Okanagan Highlands is the location we visited today, starting with the old town of Fairview and then expanding out from there to all of the places we talked about. I mean, it's wonderful to take a drive through that country. Just head down to Cara Mia. You'll go through Coston. You'll go through Olalla. You'll head over the Richter Pass to Asuyus. You can take a look at the mine that was there. A great place to visit in the South Okanagan. See you next time on Gold Trails.